The servant who never spoke entered the throne room at midnight, and Jareth Mortalis felt something inside him stir that he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries. She was a soft, rounded woman with generous curves that moved beneath her simple black uniform, her dark hair pulled back into a practical bun, her eyes cast downward as always. Olive Carter had worked in his modern estate for 6 months now, cleaning his study, organizing his ancient library, preparing the blood wine he preferred in crystal decanters. She performed every task with quiet efficiency, never meeting his gaze, never uttering a single sound. At first, he'd assumed she was simply terrified of him, as most humans were when they learned what he truly was. But as weeks turned to months, he began to notice something different in her silence. It wasn't fear, it was absence. "Olive," he said, his voice echoing through the cavernous room lined with Gothic arches and modern steel fixtures. His estate existed in the heart of the city, hidden behind layers of glamour and wealth that humans mistook for eccentricity. "Come here." She approached with measured steps, her full hips swaying, her plump hands clasped before her. She was beautiful in a way that defied the angular, starved aesthetic of modern humans. Her body was abundant, soft, real. Everything about her called to something primal in him that transcended his vampire nature. When she stood before his throne, she finally lifted her eyes. They were the color of warm honey, flecked with gold, and in them he saw intelligence, sadness, and a depth that made his dead heart ache. "Why do you never speak?" he asked, leaning forward. His white hair fell across his pale face, and he saw her gaze flicker to the sharp points of his fangs as he spoke. "In 6 months, you haven't made a single sound. Not a greeting, not a complaint, not even a gasp when you found me feeding in the East Wing." She opened her mouth, and he watched her throat work, watched her try to form words. Nothing came out, not even breath. She closed her mouth again, and the frustration in her eyes was so raw, so human, that he stood from his throne and descended the steps to stand before her. "You cannot speak," he said, and it wasn't a question anymore. "Something prevents you." She nodded, and a tear slipped down her round cheek. Jareth reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she didn't. He caught the tear on his pale finger and brought it to his lips. The taste of salt and sorrow exploded across his tongue, and with it came a flash of magic, dark and twisted. He'd tasted enough hexes and curses in his long life to recognize one immediately. "Someone took your voice," he growled, and the rage that surged through him surprised him with its intensity. "Someone stole it from you." She nodded again, more tears falling now, and he cupped her soft face in his cold hands. "Show me," he commanded, and his eyes began to glow red with ancient power. "Show me who did this to you." Vampires of his age and bloodline possessed many abilities beyond strength and immortality. He could walk through memories like halls in a museum, could see the past painted in blood and emotion. But he needed permission, needed invitation. Olive stared up at him for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, she nodded. Jareth pressed his forehead to hers, and the world dissolved. He found himself standing in a small apartment, cramped and poorly lit, watching a younger Olive, perhaps 22 or 23, her body just as beautifully rounded, her smile bright and genuine as she sang. Her voice was extraordinary, rich and powerful, the kind of voice that could fill concert halls and bring audiences to tears. She sang alone in her apartment, swaying to music only she could hear, her joy so pure it made Jareth's chest tighten. The memory shifted, and he saw her at an audition, her voice soaring through some grand theater. The judges looked stunned, delighted. She'd made it. She'd actually made it. Then the memory darkened. He saw her backstage, saw a thin woman with sharp features and jealous eyes approaching. The woman was one of the other performers, one who'd been passed over in favor of Olive's talent. "You think you're special because you can sing?" the woman hissed. "You think they'll really let someone like you stand on that stage? Look at you. You're fat, you're nobody, and you don't deserve what you have." "Leave me alone, Diana," Olive said, her voice trembling but firm. Diana smiled, and it was cruel. "I know what you are," she whispered. "I know about the magic in your blood, distant, diluted, but there. You're a descendant of the old singers, aren't you? The ones whose voices could charm and compel? That's cheating, Olive. That's not fair." "I don't know what you're talking about," Olive protested, but fear crept into her expression. "Doesn't matter," Diana said. "If you won't give up your spot willingly, I'll take what makes you special." She pulled out a small vial and threw its contents at Olive. The liquid shimmered with dark magic, reeking of old curses and stolen power. Olive tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat. She clawed at her neck, mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air, and then she collapsed. When she woke in the hospital, the doctors found nothing physically wrong, but no matter how hard she tried, no sound would ever leave her lips again. Jareth pulled back from the memory, his fangs fully extended, his eyes blazing crimson. Olive stumbled backward, fresh tears streaming down her face, reliving the trauma. "Diana," he snarled, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Where is she now?" Olive pulled out the small notepad she always carried and wrote quickly. "I don't know. She got the role. Last I heard, she was performing in Europe. That was 5 years ago. 5 years. This woman had suffered in silence for 5 years because some jealous creature had stolen her greatest gift. You have magic in your bloodline," Jareth said, his voice softer now, controlled. "Even diluted, that makes you valuable. Dangerous even. The curse that binds you is sophisticated, powered by envy and spite. Breaking it won't be simple." Olive's shoulders slumped and she wrote, "I know. I've tried everything. Doctors, therapists, even other magic users. Nothing works." "Because they were human," Jareth said, taking the notepad from her hands and setting it aside. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I am not." Hope flickered in her honey-colored eyes, fragile and desperate. "I am Jareth Mortalis, king of the northern vampire courts, and I am 537 years old. I have seen curses that could crumble kingdoms and hexes that could stop time itself. If I say I will break this, I will break this. Do you understand?" She nodded, and more tears fell, but these were different. These carried hope. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he demanded. "Why didn't you write it down? Show me, ask for help." She took back the notepad with shaking hands and wrote, "Because I'm nobody, just a servant. Why would a vampire king care about a fat human woman who can't even speak?" The words hit him like a stake to the chest. He grabbed the notepad and threw it across the room, then pulled Olive against him, wrapping his arms around her soft, abundant body. "You are not nobody," he said fiercely into her hair. "You are not just anything. And your body is not something to be ashamed of. You are beautiful, Olive Carter, and I will not hear otherwise, not even from you." She sobbed silently against his chest, her hands clutching his shirt, and he held her until the shaking stopped. Over the following weeks, Jareth threw himself into research with an obsession that surprised even his oldest advisors. He brought in ancient texts from vampire archives, consulted with witches who owed him favors, and even reached out to other supernatural creatures who specialized in curse breaking. Olive remained by his side through all of it, no longer just a servant, but something more, something neither of them had named yet. She started leaving him notes, little observations and thoughts written on scraps of paper. He found them tucked into his books, left on his desk, slipped into his coat pockets. They were funny, insightful, sometimes heartbreaking. Through her written words, he came to know her mind, and he found himself falling for her intelligence, her humor, her resilience. One night, he found her in the library, curled up in one of the large armchairs that accommodated her generous frame, reading one of his ancient journals. She looked up when he entered, and the soft smile she gave him made something warm bloom in his chest, something he thought had died centuries ago. "I spoke with a witch named Morgana today," he said, sitting across from her. "She's old, even by our standards. She said the curse binding your voice is tied to 3 things: the envy that powered it, the magic stolen from your bloodline, and the silence you've accepted as permanent." Olive frowned and reached for her notepad, but Jareth stopped her. "The first 2 I can address," he continued, "but the third, Olive, you have to believe you can speak again. Not just hope, but truly believe. The curse feeds on your acceptance of it. That's how it's sustained for so long." She wrote quickly, "I've tried believing. It doesn't work." "Because you tried alone," Jareth said. He moved from his chair to kneel before hers, taking her soft hands in his pale ones. "But you're not alone anymore. I'm going to find Diana. I'm going to make her pay for what she did. And I'm going to break this curse, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Olive stared down at him, this ancient vampire king kneeling before a plus-size human woman who couldn't speak, and slowly she nodded. "Good," he said, and then he did something he hadn't done in over a century. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, soft and reverent. I'm going to Europe tomorrow night. One of my contacts found Diana performing in Vienna. She's built quite a career on the voice she stole from you." Olive's eyes widened and she grabbed her notepad. "You're going after her?" "Yes." "What will you do?" "What needs to be done," Jareth said darkly. "She's a thief and a curse worker. By vampire law, that makes her subject to our justice, whether she knows it or not. Will you come with me?" Olive hesitated, then wrote, "Why do you want me there?" "Because this is your justice, not just mine," he said, "and because I find I don't like being apart from you." The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Olive's cheeks flushed pink, and she wrote with trembling hands, "I don't like being apart from you either." Jareth pulled her from the chair into his arms, and she came willingly, her soft body pressed against his hard one, fitting perfectly despite their differences. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, fighting the urge to bite, to taste, to claim. "When this is over," he whispered against her skin, "when you have your voice back, the first thing I want to hear you say is my name." She nodded, her hands gripping his shoulders, and they stayed like that until dawn forced him to retreat to his chambers. They flew to Vienna on his private jet, one of the many modern conveniences that made immortal life more comfortable. Olive spent the flight writing out questions about vampire culture, and Jareth answered each one with amusement and surprising patience. She asked about his turning, his family, his rise to power. He told her about the plague that had taken his human life, about the ancient vampire who turned him to save him, about the centuries of politics and war that had eventually led to his coronation as king. "I've been alone for a very long time," he admitted as they flew over the Atlantic. "Oh, I've had companions, lovers, allies, but no one I wanted to keep. No one who saw me as more than a monster or a meal ticket." He looked at her, sitting across from him in a seat that barely contained her beautiful curves. "You see me, Olive, not the king, not the vampire. Me, I don't know when that happened, but it did." She wrote quickly, her hand shaking, "I see you because you saw me first. Everyone else looks past me, through me, like I'm not even there. But you looked at me like I mattered. You do matter," Jareth said fiercely, "more than you know." They found Diana performing at a prestigious opera house, her face on posters all over the city. Jareth purchased a private box for the evening performance, and they sat in the shadows, watching the woman who had stolen everything from Olive. Diana's voice was good, technically proficient, but it lacked the soul and power that Jareth had felt in Olive's memory. This was a voice trained and polished, but not genuinely gifted. Diana had stolen magic she couldn't fully use, had cursed someone out of petty jealousy, and the universe had not rewarded her the way she'd hoped. "She's miserable," Olive wrote, watching Diana's performance with narrowed eyes. "Good," Jareth replied. "She should be." After the performance, they went backstage. Jareth's vampire abilities made it easy to slip past security, and they found Diana in her dressing room, removing her makeup. "Diana," Jareth said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of authority. The woman spun around, eyes widening when she saw him. Vampires could always recognize each other, but humans with magical sensitivity could sometimes feel what they were. Diana clearly could. "Who are you?" she demanded, but her voice shook. "I am Jareth Mortalis," he said, stepping into the light so she could see his white hair, his pale skin, his red eyes. "And I am here about a curse you cast 5 years ago." Diana's face went white, and her gaze slid past him to Olive, who stood in the doorway. Recognition and fear battled in her expression. "I don't know what you're talking about," she tried, but her heartbeat gave away the lie. "Don't insult me," Jareth said softly, dangerously. "You cursed this woman, stole her voice through dark magic, and have been using that stolen power to fuel your mediocre career. Did you really think there would be no consequences?" "She had magic in her blood," Diana protested. "Omar, that's not fair. She was cheating." "She was singing," Jareth snarled, and his fangs extended fully. "She was doing what she loved with the gifts she was born with. You had no right." "What are you going to do?" Diana whispered. "Kill me?" "Tempting," Jareth admitted, "but no, you're going to break the curse, willingly, right now." "I can't," Diana cried. "I don't know how. I bought the curse from a witch. I don't know how to undo it. Jareth moved faster than human eyes could follow, suddenly inches from Diana's face. Then you're going to come with us to see that witch, and you're going to convince her to break it. Because if you don't, I will make the rest of your existence a living hell. I am a king. Diana, I have resources, power, and time. I can destroy everything you've built, can make you wish you'd never been born. Or you can cooperate, and I might let you keep your pathetic little life. Choose now. Diana crumpled, sobbing. Okay, I'll do it. Just don't hurt me. The witch Diana had purchased the curse from lived in Prague, a 3-hour drive from Vienna. They made the trip in tense silence. Diana huddled in the back seat while Jareth drove with preternatural precision. Olive sat beside him, her hand in his, and he squeezed it gently every few minutes, reminding her he was there. The witch's shop was tucked into a narrow alley, marked only by a small symbol on the door. Inside, shelves lined with jars of herbs and stranger things stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadows. An old woman sat behind a counter, her eyes shrewd and knowing. Jareth Mortalis, she said, and there was respect in her tone. I heard you were in Europe. What brings a vampire king to my door? A curse, Jareth said, pulling Diana forward. One she purchased from you 5 years ago. One that stole a woman's voice. The witch's eyes narrowed. I remember. A nasty piece of work, that one. Cost her quite a bit. Can you break it? Jareth demanded. The witch studied Olive, who stood silently beside Jareth. I can, but it won't be easy. The curse is powered by stolen magic and sustained by silence. To break it, 3 things must happen. The caster must recant with genuine remorse. The victim must remember what it felt like to have a voice, and someone must love her enough to hear her even in silence. Jareth's hand tightened on Olive's. Then we'll do all 3. The 3rd has already been done, the witch said, looking at Jareth with ancient eyes. I can see the bond between you. You hear her, don't you? Even without words. Every day, Jareth said quietly. Good. Then we need remorse and memory. The witch turned to Diana. Do you regret what you did, girl? Diana, faced with a vampire king and a powerful witch, broke down completely. Yes, I regret it. I was jealous and petty and cruel, and I ruined her life. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The witch pulled out a small knife and pricked Diana's finger, letting a drop of blood fall into a bronze bowl. The blood hissed and smoked, turning from red to black. There's truth in her remorse, the witch said. Fear-driven, perhaps, but real enough. Now for you, girl. She turned to Olive. Close your eyes. Remember what it felt like to sing. Not just the physical act, but the joy of it, the freedom. Remember your voice not as something stolen, but as something that has always been yours. Something no curse can truly take away. Olive closed her eyes and tears streamed down her face. Jareth watched her remember, watched her face transform with the memory of joy, and his heart ached for her. The witch began to chant in a language older than kingdoms, and the air grew thick with magic. She took Olive's hand and Diana's hand, forcing them together, and then she drew a symbol in the air with smoke and shadow. Speak, she commanded Diana. Speak the words of unbinding. Give back what you took. I'm sorry, Diana gasped, and the words glowed in the air between them. I'm sorry I stole from you. I'm sorry I hurt you. I give back what I took. I release you from silence. I free your voice. The symbol flared bright, then shattered like glass. Olive's eyes flew open, and she grabbed her throat, gasping. A sound came out, small and broken, but a sound nonetheless. Olive, Jareth said, pulling her into his arms. Try, please, try. She opened her mouth, and at first nothing came. Then, like a rusty door finally opening, a whisper emerged. Jareth! His name, barely audible, but there. He crushed her against him, and she kept trying, kept pushing sound past the curse's lingering grip. Jareth, she said again, louder this time. Jareth, Jareth! I'm here, he said, and he was shaking, this ancient vampire king trembling like a human. I'm right here. Thank you, she managed, and her voice was hoarse, unpracticed, but it was hers. Thank you. Over the following days, Olive's voice grew stronger. It took practice, took patience, took hours of humming and speaking, and eventually, tentatively, singing. Jareth stayed with her through all of it, encouraging her, celebrating every new word like a victory. They remained in Europe for 2 weeks, staying in Jareth's estate in the Swiss Alps. a Gothic mansion that overlooked snow-capped mountains and pristine valleys. During the days, while Jareth rested in his chambers away from the sun, Olive practiced her voice. During the nights, they walked through the gardens, talked for hours, and fell deeper in love with every conversation. "I never thought I'd speak again," Olive said one night, standing at the balcony railing, her generous curves wrapped in a thick coat against the mountain cold. "I never thought anyone would care enough to help me." Jareth wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I care," he said simply, "more than I've cared about anything in centuries." "Why?" she asked, turning in his embrace to face him. "I'm just me. I'm not special. I'm not thin or beautiful by society's standards. I'm just Olive." "You're everything," Jareth said fiercely. "You're strong and kind and resilient. You survived something that would have broken most people. You kept going, even when you couldn't speak, even when the world treated you as less than. And you are beautiful, Olive. Your body is perfect exactly as it is, abundant, soft, real. I love every curve, every inch of you. Don't you dare let the world tell you otherwise." She started crying, and he kissed away her tears, then kissed her lips, soft and careful. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to cup his pale face, and the kiss deepened, became something desperate and hungry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olive said, "I love you. I think I've loved you since you first asked why I didn't speak, since you saw me as more than a servant." "I love you too," Jareth said, "and I want you to stay with me, not as a servant, but as my partner, my equal, my queen if you'll have me." Olive's eyes widened. "Queen? Jareth, I'm human. I can't be a vampire queen." "Why not?" he challenged. "The old laws are changing. The world is changing. I'm a king, Olive. I can make new laws. And if you choose it freely, I can offer you immortality. Not now, not rushed, but someday. When you're ready, if you're ever ready." "You turn me," she whispered. "Only if you wanted it," he said firmly. "I would never take that choice from you. But yes, if you asked, I would turn you. I would give you eternity. Because the thought of existing for centuries without you is unbearable." Olive was silent for a long moment, processing. Then she said, "I need time to think about immortality, about what that means. But I don't need time to know I want to be with you. I want to stay. I want to be yours in whatever way that means." "Then you will be," Jareth said, kissing her again. "My love, my heart, my Olive." They returned to his estate in the city a week later, and Jareth immediately called a council of his vampire court, the throne room filled with ancient vampires, all of them pale-skinned and regal, all of them loyal to their king, but curious about this sudden assembly. Jareth stood before them with Olive at his side, her hand firmly in his. "I am taking a consort," he announced, and the room erupted in murmurs. "This is Olive Carter. She is human, she is mine, and she will be treated with the respect and deference due to my chosen partner. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Is that clear?" The vampires bowed their heads in acknowledgement. They might have questions, might have concerns, but they knew better than to challenge their king. One of the elder vampires, a woman named Seraphina, who had been Jareth's advisor for 2 centuries, stepped forward. "My king," she said carefully, "it is your right to choose a consort, but the court will have questions. A human consort is unusual." "I'm aware," Jareth said dryly, "and I don't care. Olive is mine, and that's final." Seraphina studied Olive, who met her gaze without flinching despite the obvious power imbalance. Then the elder vampire smiled, sharp and approving. "She has spine! Good! She'll need it to deal with you." The tension in the room broke, and several vampires actually laughed. Jareth relaxed slightly, pulling Olive closer. "There's one more thing," he said. "I'm officially offering a bounty for any information on Diana Winter's whereabouts and activities. She's been banned from Europe under pain of death. If she tries to work magic again, if she harms anyone else, I want to know immediately." "Consider it done, my king," Seraphina said. Over the following months, Olive settled into her new life. She was no longer a servant, but the king's consort, which came with its own challenges and adjustments. The vampires of Jareth's court were initially skeptical, but gradually came to respect her intelligence and kindness. She mediated disputes with surprising skill. offered perspectives Jareth hadn't considered and brought a warmth to the Gothic estate that had been missing for centuries. She also continued to develop her voice. With practice, her singing returned more powerful and beautiful than before. The magic in her bloodline, no longer suppressed by the curse, began to manifest in subtle ways. When she sang, people listened with rapt attention, compelled by something more than just her technical skill. It wasn't mind control, wasn't manipulation, but it was undeniably magic. I think the curse breaking unlocked something, she told Jareth one night after she had finished practicing. I can feel it when I sing, like there's power in the sound itself. Your ancestor magic, Jareth said thoughtfully. The old singers could charm, inspire, even heal with their voices. That's probably why Diana's curse was so effective. She was binding something genuinely powerful. What should I do with it? Olive asked. Whatever you want, Jareth said. It's your gift, your choice. But if you wanted to perform again, to share your voice with the world, I would support you. I'd make sure you were safe, protected. No one would ever steal from you again. Olive considered this for a long time. Then she said, I think I'd like to sing for people who need it. Not for fame or money, but for healing. I've read about music therapy, about how sound can help people recover from trauma. Maybe that's what my magic is meant for. Then that's what you'll do, Jareth said, pulling her into his lap despite her self-conscious protests about her weight. He never let her forget that he found her body perfect, that her softness and curves were things he treasured. I'll fund whatever program you want to create. We'll find people who need your gift and you'll help them. She kissed him deeply, pouring gratitude and love into the gesture. How did I get so lucky? She murmured against his lips. I ask myself the same thing every night, Jareth replied. A year after the curse broke, Olive sat in the same throne room where she'd first caught Jareth's attention. But this time, she wasn't a silent servant. She was sitting beside his throne in a chair of her own, wearing a deep blue gown that hugged her generous curves, her hair styled elegantly, a thin silver circlet resting on her brow. She'd just finished singing for a group of human trauma survivors, using her magic-infused voice to help ease their pain and fear. The program she'd created was growing, earning recognition in both human and supernatural communities. People traveled from across the country to hear her sing, to experience the healing her voice could provide. Jareth watched her with undisguised pride and love, his hand reaching out to take hers. You're happy, he observed. I am, she said, and her voice was strong and clear with no trace of the silence that had once defined her. I never thought I could be this happy. I thought I'd lost everything when Diana cursed me. But losing my voice led me here, to you, to this life. I almost don't regret it. I regret it, Jareth said darkly. I regret that you suffered, but I'm grateful for where we ended up. Olive squeezed his hand. I've been thinking, she said carefully, about what you offered me, about immortality. Jareth went very still. And I'm not ready yet, she said honestly. I'm only 28. I want to live more of my human life, experience more, do more with my magic. But someday, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20, I think I'd like to say yes. I think I'd like forever with you. Relief and joy flooded Jareth's expression. Whenever you're ready, he promised, I'll wait. I have nothing but time, and I want to spend all of it with you. Even when I'm old and gray? She teased. Especially then, he said seriously. Every version of you, every age, every moment. I love you, Olive Carter, and I will love you until the stars burn out. She kissed him there in the throne room in front of the empty court, and he kissed her back with centuries of loneliness finally healed. That night, they stood together on the balcony of his estate, looking out over the city lights. Olive leaned against him, secure in his arms, and began to hum softly. The melody was one she'd written herself, infused with her magic, and it spoke of love and healing and second chances. Jareth listened, content in a way he'd never imagined possible, and made a silent vow to protect this woman, this voice, this love, for as long as existence allowed. Olive's voice rose into the night, no longer stolen, no longer silent, but free and powerful and entirely her own. And in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd found where she belonged, not as a servant, not as someone invisible or less than, but as herself, loved exactly as she was, voice and body and soul. The vampire king and his plus-size human consort stood together under the stars, and the future stretched before them, bright and endless and full of possibility. 10 years later, on the anniversary of the day they met, Olive made her choice. She stood before Jareth in a private ceremony, surrounded by the vampire court that had come to love her as much as their king did, and she said the words that would change everything. "I am ready. Make me yours forever." Jareth, who had waited patiently through a decade of her human life, who had supported every dream and celebrated every achievement, finally allowed himself to hope for eternity. "Are you certain?" he asked, giving her one last chance to choose differently. "I've never been more certain of anything," Olive said, her voice strong and sure. "I've lived, Jareth. I've healed people with my magic. I've seen the world. I've experienced everything I needed to as a human. Now I want forever with you." He kissed her, then deep and claiming, and when he pulled back, his fangs were fully extended. "This will hurt," he warned. "I know," she said. "I'm not afraid, not with you." He bit her neck carefully, taking her blood slowly, reverently, until her heartbeat began to slow. Then he bit his own wrist and held it to her lips. "Drink," he commanded. "Drink and be reborn." Olive drank, and the taste of his ancient blood was like lightning and honey, burning and sweet. Her body convulsed as the change began, as her human cells died and were reborn as something other, something immortal. Jareth held her through all of it, whispering words of love and encouragement, promising her that she would survive, that she would be magnificent. 3 days later, Olive woke as a vampire. Her skin was pale like moonlight. Her eyes now held a crimson glow, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw that her body was exactly the same, still gloriously curved and abundant, but now eternal. "I'm still me," she said, relief and wonder in her voice. "Of course you are," Jareth said, wrapping his arms around her from behind so they could both see their reflection. "Did you think I'd let you become anything less? You're perfect, Olive. You always were." She turned in his arms and kissed him. Vampire to vampire now, equals in power and immortality. "My king," she said. "My queen," he replied, and he meant it in every way. The court formally recognized her that night, and Olive stood beside Jareth's throne wearing a crown of silver and sapphires, her hand in his, her voice ready to sing for centuries to come. She continued her healing work, now with the added strength and power of her vampire nature. People still came to hear her voice, still found peace in her magic, and she gave it freely, a gift passed down through generations and finally, wonderfully reclaimed. Jareth ruled his kingdom with Olive at his side, and together they became legendary. The vampire king and his singing queen, proof that love could transcend species, that second chances were real, and that sometimes the greatest gifts came from the darkest curses. Decades turned to centuries, and they remained as devoted to each other as they'd been in those early days. Olive never regretted her choice, never looked back with longing at her human life. She had everything she needed in Jareth, in her magic, in the endless time they had to explore and love and simply be together. On quiet nights, she would sit in the throne room where they'd first met and sing, her voice echoing through the Gothic halls. Jareth would listen from his throne, watching her with the same wonder and love he'd felt that first night, when a silent servant had entered his life and changed everything. "I love you," she would sing, and the words carried magic and truth. "I love you," he would reply, and the words carried centuries of devotion. They were eternal now, bound by blood and love and a bond that nothing could break. The servant who never spoke had found her voice, and the vampire king who'd been alone for centuries had found his heart. Together they ruled, they loved, and they sang their way through immortality, proving that even in darkness, even in silence, love could always find a way. And they lived truly and completely forever after.